Project Apollo was? Project Apollo, okay. Going to the moon, okay. Well, way back there, John F. Kennedy. Y'all heard of John F. Kennedy?
Yes.
Okay, President of the United States. He needed a project to get everybody excited. So he decided going to the moon sounded pretty good. So he kind of tagged us on one of his speeches. I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out. You know what a decade is, don't you? 10 years?
Yep.
Before 10 years of landing a man on the moon. And then he said something the astronauts were very interested in hearing. Returning him safely to Earth. So they asked for volunteers.
Oh, can I be volunteer?
Well, we're not volunteering this morning. This is back in the beginning. So here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to launch from the Earth, go into an orbit around the Earth, like the shuttle does. So then we're going to do another burn and come out of the Earth's orbit, close to the moon, circle the moon, land on the moon, and then go back up to orbit and come out of orbit of the moon and come back to the Earth and land. That was Project Apollo. Well, we have to have some astronauts. Like I say, about 75 volunteers. NASA chose 7. These are the original 7 astronauts. They're standing next to a jet plane down in the Ellington Air Force Base here in Houston. Y'all been to Ellington? You ever been to the air show down there? Some of you have. See the air show, huh? Well, that's where they are. There they are. You might recognize a couple of them. I don't know. There's John Glenn. Remember him? He became a U.S. Senator. Some of them they went on to do different things. There's Shepard. He's the first man that ever went into space on a rocket. Okay, next slide. This is the rocket that we built to get to the moon. This right here is a 3-story building. If somebody were standing here, they wouldn't even reach up to the first nozzle of the first rocket right here, 6 feet. You can see, pretty tall, 326 feet tall. Here's one of the engines down at the bottom. There's 5 of them. Here's a person right here. See how big around those things are? Those are the most powerful jet engines ever made. This is what landed on the moon. Here's a lunar lander. It has 4 legs. 1, 2, 3, and there's one right back behind you can't see here. There's a ladder. The astronauts were in this part of the vehicle. The whole thing landed just like that. By the way, this picture was taken at the Rocket and Space Museum in Huntsville, Alabama. Have y'all ever been there? There we go. Okay. And then neat place. They have lots of rockets there, don't they? Here's some of them. Does that look familiar?
Yep.
Yep. These are some of the old Army rockets. This one right here is the Mercury Redstone rocket. This is the rocket that put the first astronaut up into space. Very, very small compared to the Saturn V. There it is. That's in Huntsville also. This is the Mercury Redstone during one of its test flights out in White Sands, New Mexico. That's where they were first built, and they tested them. You see how desolate everything looks? That's the desert out there. Very simple stand to lift off from. Here you can see the exhaust coming out. It doesn't throw up all the smoke. The astronauts would be up here. This is just a test flight. There's no astronaut on that. In order to get to Earth orbit, you've got to have some guidance equations. And these come from mathematics. And what guidance equations do, it tells the vehicle when it lifts off the pad and it starts to tilt over and go up to get into Earth orbit, how to tilt on the way up. And this is an example of what they look like on the Saturn V. We had some calculations here, and then this block right here is where it calculated the angle that it needed to be turned over. And it also might need to fly sideways, so it has a sideways angle as well as pitch angle, what we call pitch over. And we calculate these equations every 2 seconds, depending upon how the vehicle was doing. If it was if the engines weren't pushing quite as hard as we thought, or if it's starting to get off course a little bit, maybe a little bit of wind in the atmosphere, then it would automatically correct for that, so it got into the proper orbit. Here are the 3 astronauts that landed on the moon the first time. Neil Armstrong, y'all familiar with him? Who's that guy?
Edwin E. Buzz. Edwin E. Aldrin Jr.
Edward Aldrin. And this guy right here,
Michael Collins.
Michael Collins. Y'all can really see good. Okay. Education is absolutely essential if you want to work in the space program or any technical program when you get out of school. These guys were test pilots. They flew jet airplanes. But that didn't mean that they were qualified to be astronauts or to work for NASA. Consider Robert Goddard. He's the father of American rocket science. The Goddard Space Flight Center in Virginia was named after him. PhD in physics. Werner von Braun from Germany. It was the one that was responsible for building the Saturn V, the rocket that got us to the moon. PhD in physics. Neil Armstrong. Say, well, the test pilot landed on the moon. He had a master's degree from the University of Southern California in aerospace engineering. Our command pilot, Michael Collins, graduated from West Point, considered a really great school. Our lunar pilot, Buzz Aldrin, that we just talked about, Edward Aldrin, had a PhD in aeronautics from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. These guys were very smart, and they got their school, and then when the opportunity arose, they were ready to do something. And the same thing applies to you and me and everyone else. Get all the school that you can, and then when the opportunity comes, maybe you'll be an astronaut. Here's the Saturn V lifting off. You can see it's just off the pad. Here comes the propulsion. Smoke is coming out, blowing. Liquid hydrogen and oxygen are the propellants. You know what happens when you mix hydrogen and oxygen and have a little spark? It explodes. A rocket is a controlled explosion. And so here it is, starting to lift off the pad. This is the tower that keeps it from falling over until it releases it and it starts up. The astronauts are right up here at the very top. Here it is about a minute later. As the rocket flies through the atmosphere and it starts to pick up speed, the atmosphere pushes down on it harder and harder, resisting it flying through the air. And it reaches a point where it has the maximum amount of force pushing on the rocket. And that's called maximum dynamic pressure. Right here, see this little cloud type of thing? It's just went through maximum dynamic pressure. It's kind of like it's a shock wave that happens. It's just like going through Mach 1. And you can actually see it. Just like we need guidance equations to get into orbit, we're going to need some equations that tells us where to go and how to steer the vehicle when we leave the Earth's orbit and head towards the moon. And these equations are very much like the others, except they have a bunch of equations here to say, when should you ignite the engine? And because you want to ignite it at the right spot so that when you burn for a while and you cut off, then you're headed in the right direction towards the moon. So you need some equations to tell you how to steer, you need some to tell you how to ignite it, you need some to tell you when to cut off. Now, where are we going? Well, we're going to land right here in the city of Tranquility, and that's located near the equator of the moon. I brought along a globe. And on this globe, when you leave, you can take a look right here. I'll leave the pointers for you. Right here, it says Apollo 11 landed here on July the 20th, 1969, right near the equator. And the reason why they chose this spot is because it's smooth and it's near the equator. It's easy to get to. So the first time we wanted to land on the moon, we wanted to make it as easy as possible. Later flights landed various places in other spots on the moon that were harder to get to. This was the easiest one for Apollo 11, which was the first lunar landing.
Did they actually make a marking there, as the picture shows?
Well, they left the American flag, and of course the lunar descent part is there. There's things there. This is a picture of the wall. The first thing that Neil Armstrong said when the lunar vehicle set down on the moon, the Eagle has landed. And why did he say that? Well, he named the lunar descent module the Eagle. So he says, the spacecraft has landed on the moon. That's what he was saying. The Eagle has landed. This is a picture on the wall at the Smithsonian Space Museum in Washington, D.C. Have y'all been there? There we go. Well, that's a good place, isn't it? Been to the one out by the airport that has 500,000 airplanes? Takes all day to even look at them. On one of the legs of the lunar lander was this little plaque. Here men from the Earth, planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, July 1969. We came in peace for all mankind. Here's the three astronauts. Richard Nixon, who was President of the United States at the time. Here are the patches for each of the missions, starting with 7. The astronauts, these are the ones that were put up by the Saturn V rocket, went into orbit, test out the command module. The second one, number 8, went up and went around the moon and took all the pictures on the backside of the moon and mapped the entire moon. So that the first time we had a globe that knew exactly what the moon looked like. And they verified that this would be the best landing site, the easiest one to get to. Then we had further studies where they went up into Earth orbit and checked out the docking between the modules, and then they did some more docking tests, and then came number 11. And number 11, you can see the Eagle. The lunar lander was named the Eagle. Number 11 was our first attempt to land on the moon, which was successful. Then we had 12 that landed, and then 13, remember the fuel cell blew out, and they couldn't make it to the moon, they had to turn around and come back. Then we had 14, 15, 16, and 17 was the last one. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 landings on the moon. Here's a picture of the Smithsonian Institute in Washington on the wall with a painting. You see there's an astronaut with his little digger tool, and he's holding an American flag. Here's the rover with the 4 wheels. There's another astronaut. There's a spaceship that came down. This kind of looks like fireworks. I never could quite figure out what this was supposed to be. And there's some guy. That's me. Okay. Here's a lunar rover that they got around the moon in on some of the later flights. Here's an antenna pointed back to the Earth. It's sitting on the ground here. Here's another antenna on the vehicle. Here's an astronaut carrying a big backpack. You think that backpack weighs more or less? Less. Less. There you go. Y'all are smart. In fact, it weighs 1/6 what it would here on Earth. If you weigh 140 pounds on Earth, you probably weigh about 23 pounds on the moon. So it's really easy to get around. You can hop around, jump around, carry big backpacks up there. You'll be Superman on the moon. Here's a picture of the shuttle. There's somebody standing right there, you can see. Gives you an idea of the size of it. This is in Huntsville, Alabama also. If you get a chance to go to that museum, be sure and go. Here's a shot of the shuttle. Guess what they're doing there? They're taking it back down to the Cape. Landed out in California, and they need to get it back to the Cape for the next flight. So they just bolt to the top of 747 and fly down there with it. Y'all probably seen that picture before, haven't you? That's a nice picture. I know we all like to do a spacewalk. Doesn't make any difference whether it's right side up, upside down, no gravity. Work on the Hubble telescope. There we are. That's an astronaut. This is the Ares rocket that was launched on the 16th of this month. It's the same height as the Saturn V, but it's only 20 feet in diameter compared to 33 feet for the Saturn, so it's really a slender rocket. it's setting on the crawler to pick it out to the launch site. Here it is at liftoff. See the smoke? Same launch pad we used for the Saturn V. Nothing's changed in 40 years. Okay, now. What we're going to do, we're going to make our trip again. And we're going to do it with Saturn V. The biggest, most powerful rocket ever built. We saw a picture of it lifting off.
Yeah, y'all get quiet and listen.
Okay, let's see if we can pick up the countdown. Oh, what we're going to do, when the Saturn V lifts off, there's a stand out here, you know, the launch tower out here that holds it until it gets ready to lift off. It takes 12 seconds to clear this launch tower, 300 feet. Then it starts to pick up speed. Once it clears the tower, the first thing it does is roll. It rolls around its axis. And the reason why it does that, there's one of these fins down here, it's called the #1 fin. And the #1 fin is where it's going to pitch over to start up into orbit. So it has to roll to get that fin pointed where it's going to pitch. And so it rolls, and it gets through rolling at about 30 seconds, and then it pitches over. And those of y'all that have seen the shuttle, you notice that the shuttle, when it takes off like this, it takes up like this, and if you watch it on television, it rolls 180 degrees and actually goes up into orbit like this. And that's the same type of thing. You're going to roll to where you want to pitch, and then you pitch over. So let's pick up the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2,
There we go. Hear those engines? We don't have any smoke, but it's going up. There's 12 seconds to clear the tire. Takes a while. Now we're going to roll. See, we're starting to roll now. And then we start the pitch program, and we start up through the atmosphere. That's as high as I can go. After about a minute, and about almost a minute and a half, going through the atmosphere with the atmosphere pressing down here, we reach the point to where it has maximum pressure right here on this part, where it starts to get larger. So that's called maximum dynamic pressure. And that's a very critical part. We want to be going straight into the atmosphere there, not turning the vehicle. If we're turning the vehicle and we go through that maximum pressure, it was breaking neck. That'll be the end of the vehicle. So we don't want to do that. We keep going until the first stage. There we go. First stage burns out. This comes apart. This falls off into the ocean. Now you notice the first stage has the 5 big engines I was showing you a while ago on the deal. See those engines? Each one is 1.5 million pounds of thrust. Times 5 is 7.5 million pounds pushing. The whole rocket weighs 6 million pounds. So you got 6 for the weight, 7.5 pushing. It's going to go up. You have to have more push than you do weight, or it's not moving. So it goes up. This falls in the ocean, sinks. Everybody's kind of interested in that. I don't know why, but it does. It sinks to the bottom of the ocean. Then the S2 stage, this is called the S1C stage. This is called the S2 stage. It ignites. It has 5 engines also. They're smaller, but there's 5 of them down here. It takes off, and it continues on. And then at about 9 minutes into the ascent flight, the S1C stage runs out of fuel. It separates. It falls off, goes into the ocean, sinks. No parachute, no recovery, just clear the bottom. This one, I know you always ask that. You always wonder because of shallow. You pick stuff up. Those days, the early days, we just got rid of it. Okay, here's the third stage, ignites, and then it goes up, and this is what puts us into Earth orbit. So, let's take a look at the mission and see where we are. We have the Earth here, and we have the moon over here. And we have lifted off the Earth from the Cape, and we've gone into this circular Earth orbit here, and we're in Earth orbit going around with this configuration right here, vehicles. The moon, while we're going around, the moon is moving this direction. Now what we're going to do, we're going to reignite this stage right here, pick up more speed, and come out of Earth orbit and head towards the moon. And when we cut off here, we're going to be going about 36,000 feet per second is going to be our speed. Now, at 37,000 feet per second, I'd like to ask this question. Do you think that's faster than a speeding bullet? Or slower? Well, we kind of have a different opinion. A bullet travels about 3,000 feet per second. So we're going 12 times faster than a bullet when you leave Earth orbit and this burns out. Now what we're going to do, we're going to coast through space, away from the Earth, for 3 days. And so we're not going to aim when we talk about guidance and targeting. Our target is to get to the moon, but the moon is not going to be here in 3 days. The moon's going to be up here. So we have to know the mathematics of all this, where the moon is relative to the Earth and where it's going to be, so that we can aim in the right spot here. Because once we get here, we're going to break our velocity and we're going to go into a circular orbit around the moon. So here we are. We're headed out from the Earth. This is reignited. We're burning along, and we've cut off. Now what happens? I forgot to get rid of my escape tire. This tire right here, during the ascent phase, this is another rocket at the top. The astronauts are right here, this little command module, at the very top. And when this comes off, the idea of this is if something goes wrong down here, this could ignite and pull the astronauts away safely. So this is discharged after a while going up. So now we look like this. Now we burn out of Earth orbit and we're coasting towards the moon. And what happens now is that the service module comes apart like this, flies out ahead a little bit. This fly here, just like a flower, opens up like this. The astronauts then turn around, come back, dock here, pull the lunar lander out of here. Okay. This now is used up. We've used up most of the fuel. It's coasting along with this. We want to get rid of it. There's some small rockets back here around the outside. Those are fired up and points this towards the sun, and it goes to the sun and burns up. And remember, this one's coasting with us. Right here. We're like right here. And we've got that part and this part, and we want to get rid of it. So they pointed out here towards the sun. Unfortunately, on Apollo 11, they missed and it hit the moon. So we have one of these that have impacted the moon. The rest of them, after Apollo 11, they got it right and went to the sun and burned up. So now we're floating through space with this, going 36,000 feet per second. At this point, we continue on out this way. And we're going along here, and after 3 days, we come into the gravitational effect of the moon, which we know is 1/6 less than the Earth, but it still has gravity. So we come into here, we ignite this rocket, it slows us down, so we go into the lunar orbit like this. So now we're in lunar orbit in this configuration. We're going around in a circle. At this point, Armstrong and Aldrin crawl from the command module here into the lunar lander and separate the two vehicles right here. Both in orbit. Michael Collins stays up here in this one, and they're in this one. Now what happens? Let's say we're going to land over here on this smooth spot right here, and we're coming around the moon, and we're going like this. And you see on the front, you see those two black areas right there on each side? Those are windows. I always say it was kind of like a bug looking at you. But these are the windows. They're both standing up. There's no chair to sit down in the limb. They're both standing up. They're looking out the window, and they're on their backs like this, going in orbit. Can't see a thing. When you look from the moon out into the universe, it's absolutely black. There is no atmosphere that reflects any light, so it doesn't look like Earth where there's some light and everything. It's just black. That's all you see. At this point, they got to slow down to land over here, so the engine comes on, ignites the engine. They start slowing down. They go like that for a while, and this slows them down going horizontally. Now they start to drop. When they get down to about 10,000 feet, they do a pitch-up maneuver like this. Now they can see the landing site for the first time. And now the engine is starting to slow them down vertically. And the idea is they're going to come in like this, and they're going to land. So when they come up, what does Armstrong see out the window? On the window of the limb are crosshairs like this. And they have little marks here. And right here is the landing site. When he looks right through these crosshairs and looks on beyond that, that's where the limb is going to land. The computer's going to land it there. He has a joystick just exactly like the one you play games with. If he clicks it, if he moves it forward one time, that's called one click, and he's going to land right there. Clicks forward twice, he's going to land right there. Click it to the right once, he's going to land over there. He's going to land over there. It's going to come up short here. And what does he see when he pitches up? He sees these big old huge rocks right there, right where he's going to land. He goes, uh-oh, this is not where I want to land. He looks up here, and he 3 up, and he goes, hey, it looks smooth down there. So he goes click, 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 and it reorients it and puts the landing site here, back down here in the crosshairs, and now it's a smooth place to land. Of course, that's his job as the pilot to do that. But Aldrin was there to help him. What Aldrin is doing is telling him how fast they're moving. You get on the internet, you can search on lunar landing audio, something like that, and you can hear the audio of what they're saying in the limb as they start to land on the surface of the moon. And you'll hear Buzz Aldrin say, 6 down, 4 right. What that means is 6 feet per second going down, 4 feet per second to the right. And every once in a while he'll say altitude, something or other. But particularly important is the downward velocity. You want to land at about 3 feet per second. Land too fast and break off these legs, you're not going to be able to go back up into orbit. And so you've got to land, and you've got to land before you run out of fuel. You only have so much fuel. So you're looking for a landing site, you're readjusting, you're coming down, you have so much fuel, you've got to come down at a certain velocity to make sure you land safely. And he's reading out the velocity. And at one point you'll hear him say 60 seconds. That means he has 60 seconds of fuel left. He's either got to find the landing site, or they've got to abort and go back up in orbit and not land. So eventually they come down and they land on the moon. And the first thing that Neil says is, the Eagle has landed. And the reason why is because he named this the Eagle. So he's telling Houston they have landed on the moon. They get out, they walk around for a few hours, they get back in, and then here comes Collins. The whole time he's been circling the moon overhead, going around the moon like this. They then ignite the ascent engine, and the guidance equations take over. The limb here takes off, goes up into orbit. Here they come, like this, and they end up about the right same space. That's where the guidance and the targeting comes in, and all the mathematics. And then they turn around and they dock back together like this. And then the 2 astronauts and the lunar lander get back into the command module. And then they're back in the same configuration and they're going around the moon. At this point, the moon has moved on above it. And they're in Earth, and they're in a circular orbit here. So they reignite this engine right here, which pushes them out of lunar orbit and comes back to the Earth. Now you got 3 days to coast back again, coming back to the Earth. On the way back, after a while, they don't need this. This disconnects, goes off into space. And they also disconnect this command module. This goes off into space. Let's see with that. And what they have left is the command module that has the heat shield on the bottom here. And it starts into the atmosphere like this, is the way they come into the atmosphere. Down here's the aircraft carrier. And that's quite a few hundred miles away, so they want to get as close as they can. And so, if you think about this capsule, the center of gravity is off center. Now y'all haven't studied this kind of stuff yet, but what happens is, what that means is that if this is positioned a certain way, it will cause it to decelerate and come into the atmosphere kind of steep. The number of G's will build up. Remember, they've been out in space where there's been no gravity for 3 days. Now suddenly, they're going to have 6 times the force of gravity than they are on the Earth. They're going to weigh 840 pounds is what they're going to feel like when they come in. And when they get to that point, they roll 180 degrees. It causes it to rise in the atmosphere. Remember, they're going about 25,000 feet per second at this point. It's going to rise, but the number of G's are going to start going down to about 3. Feels much better. And now they've still got the problem of where they're going to land. And the way they control that, they turn it 90 degrees, and that lift causes it to go this way. Turn 180, and it comes back this way. So they can go back and forth as they go down into the atmosphere more and slow down. They go back and forth, adjusting this back and forth, so they'll end up at the right spot. 3 parachutes come out. They land in the water. They send out the helicopters. They open up the hatch, and the 3 astronauts made it back to Earth. And you see the little astronauts in the top. They're in there. And so that. So we started off with this at the top of the Saturn V, and this is the only thing that came back. And it's very important to get rid of all this weight along the way so we can use smaller and smaller rockets and engines as we go along. And that was Project Apollo. That's how we left the Earth, went to the moon, and came safely back.
Excuse me, is Apollo and the moon real-life scale?
Yes, they are. These are 144th to the foot to 1 to 144. These are the same scale. That's a good question. You can see that the scale is such that the Saturn V is much larger than the shuttle. There's a Saturn V. You can see the shuttle. When the shuttle sets on the pad, it's about like the first stage. Of course, the shuttle lifts off like this, does its roll, and with a 180-degree roll like this, then it does a pitch like this to get into orbit. And on the way, it drops off the solid propellant tanks here and here. These are solid fuel rockets. Solid fuel gives you a little bit more thrust per pound of fuel than liquid does. But you can't control how much thrust you get out of the solid rockets. They just burn at a fixed amount of thrust, and that's it. And you need some variable thrust here. This is a big hydrogen oxygen tank, and all goes through the shuttle here. And one thing they do on the shuttle, when they get close to maximum dynamic pressure going through the atmosphere, they actually throttle these engines down to not push so hard, and the vehicle slows down, and it causes the dynamic pressure to be less when it goes through that. Then they throttle them back up again, and then full blast on up into orbit. And then after a while, this tank comes off. And they have parachutes on these, and they pick these up. It goes into orbit, and then when it gets into orbit, then they can turn around, right side up as you think of it, and dock with the space station or repair the Hubble telescope or whatever they're going to do, or whatever they're picking up in the cargo base for the shuttle. Then the shuttle, when it comes back, the shuttle gets in a configuration like this, fires these to slow it down. As it starts back into the atmosphere, then the shuttle turns around like this and comes in like this till it gets down fairly low. Then it does its flare-up maneuver. Then it comes in like this, and then it tilts over, and then lands at 220 miles per hour. You see the parachutes coming out. Y'all have all seen that on television. Do you have any questions?
Actually, is that spaceship reusable?
Which one?
Is that spaceship reusable?
Which one? The Saturn?
No, not the Apollo, but the upper spaceship you
Oh,
showed.
this one?
The second one.
Yeah, these are reusable. These tanks here, they have parachutes and they pick them up.
Well, I
out
mean
of
the
the-
spaceship itself.
Oh, yes, this right here. Oh, yeah. Yeah, these are made mini flights. These are all reusable.
So they're all reusable. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the idea of the shuttle, is to make a spacecraft that would go to orbit, Earth orbit, not the moon, but go to Earth orbit, and be able to carry things up there, build a space station, and be able to use it more than once.
When they drop them with the parachute, where they land.
Oh, they land out in the ocean. Let me see. I think I've got a note here. But, they go out, the solid tank end up about 140 miles off the Cape Canaveral out in the ocean. So it's not just, it's not a few feet, like 140 miles is where these land. And then this one lands both. But they know about where they're going to land, so they have a ship out there. Pick them up.
Any questions? Where'd you get the models?
The model, I ordered it through the internet. It's called, I'll tell you what, I can email Dr. O. It's called Space Voyagers for the Saturn. Yeah, you kind of look around for them. I'm going to get an Aries model next.
Anybody else have any questions before we go?
Okay, guys, what do you think? We went all the way to the moon and we made it back safely. I want you to give a big round of applause.
Who knows what Apollo 11 was? Okay, we got a whole bunch.
Wasn't that the one where they landed?
Landed on the moon.
The first, full of space.
Yep, that's right. John F. Kennedy. Y'all seem to have heard of him.
Yeah.
President. He needed a program to get everybody excited, get science going, everybody interested in something, and so he added this to one of his speeches in 1969. That was a long time ago. How long was that? 40 years ago? I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out. That means within 10 years. Of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. We forget about the return part sometimes, but that was important to the astronauts. So they asked for volunteers. First of all, I've got a few pictures and slides here I wanted to show you what the objective is. This is the Earth. We're going to launch from Cape Canaveral, and we're going to go into Earth orbit. Then we're going to come out of Earth orbit and coast to the moon. We're going to go into lunar orbit. Then we're going to land on the moon, come back up, depart from lunar orbit, and come back to the Earth. That's what Project Apollo was. Now, in order to do this with men, you needed volunteers. So NASA asked for volunteers, and about 75 volunteered. And out of this, they picked 7. Here are the original 7 astronauts. They're behind the jet airplane. They're out at Ellington Air Force Base here in the Houston area. Probably some of you have been there. Been to Ellington at the air show down there? That's where they're standing right there. This is John Glenn. Oh, you heard of him. He went on to be a U.S. Senator. Here's Carpenter, the first man ever into space for the U.S. This is the rocket that took us to the moon. This is a 3-story building. If someone were standing underneath it, they wouldn't come up to this first rocket engine right here off the ground. You can see how tall that is. 363 feet tall. There's 5 engines at the bottom of the Saturn V. This is you can see one of them here. There's actually 5 here. There's a person standing here. You can see the size of one of the housings of the rocket engines. The largest rocket engine ever built. Here's what landed on the surface of the moon. It has 4 legs, 2, 3. There's another one right back here. Here's the ladder where they climb down to the surface of the moon. The 2 astronauts were in this vehicle right here. And you can see the background here. This is sitting in a little crater-like thing. This is in Huntsville, Alabama. Have any of you ever been to the Rocket Museum in Huntsville, Alabama? Okay, we have several. Isn't that a neat place? They have a lot of rockets there. Does that look familiar? You probably saw that. This is the Mercury Redstone, the first rocket that ever put an astronaut up into space. Fairly small rocket compared to the Saturn V. There it is. Here's some other rockets that the Army developed. Here's another picture of the Redstone. You see it has the distinctive markings at the top there, and there's the capsule where the astronaut would be. And this is a test flight way back in probably about 1956 or 57 out at White Sands, New Mexico, where they developed this rocket and did the testing. You can see the desolate landscape and how simple the launch pad is. It was just a simple little steel structure that they set it on and set it off and hoped it went up, instead of sideways or something like that. Now, in order to get a rocket into orbit, into Earth orbit, or to get a rocket to go anywhere, you've got to have some guidance equations that tells it which way to go. This is a flow chart of what the guidance equations look like for the Saturn to get it into Earth orbit. First, there's some initial calculations here, and then these are done on board the vehicle on the onboard computer. And finally, these equations here calculate how much it should be pitched over, and if it should need to fly sideways somewhat, they calculate both the sideways and the pitch over direction that it should be going. These equations I mentioned, they're recalculated every 2 seconds. Every 2 seconds the vehicle flies, the onboard computer and platform measures the acceleration, the position, the velocity, how much acceleration the engines are putting out, and then can recalculate how to steer the vehicle based on how it's doing. These are the 3 astronauts that first landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. Now, we think of these 3 guys that landed on the moon the first time. They were test pilots. Some of them was in the Navy, Air Force, and they were pretty smart guys, but they had something else. All had something else in common. They had a really good education. If we look at the space program history, we can see Robert H. Goddard, who was the father of the American rocket science. He was the first one that really took rockets seriously and started building rockets. He had an amazing number of patents. He had like 60 or 70 different patents on different things. He used liquid hydrogen, oxygen to fly. And you might recognize the name Goddard. The Goddard Space Flight Center is named after him. He had a PhD in physics. Wernher von Braun came from Germany. He was the one that was responsible for building the rocket that got us to the moon. PhD in physics. Neil Armstrong, who was one of the 3 astronauts that went down to the lunar surface. had a master's degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Southern California. We had the command module pilot, Michael Collins, graduated from West Point. Then we had Buzz Aldrin, who was the co-pilot for Neil Armstrong, went down to the moon the first time, had a PhD from Massachusetts Institute of Technology in aerospace science. So these guys, what they were test pilots, they were energetic, they stayed in school, got as much education as they could. When the opportunity came to be an astronaut, they were chosen because of their education, because they were ready to take on the challenge. Here's the Saturn V. It's starting to lift off. Here's the tower. Here's the rocket itself. It's just off the pad. You can see all the flames coming out, shooting around. It has the first stage has liquid hydrogen and oxygen. You know, when you mix hydrogen and oxygen and provide a little spark, there's an explosion. And that's what a rocket engine is. It's a controlled explosion. You control how big the explosion is, and it comes out the back, and it provides the thrust that pushes the vehicle up. Here's the Saturn V, about a minute after liftoff. See this kind of white thing right here? That's a shock wave. You can actually see it. The atmosphere forms it. It's because it's now traveling fast enough that it's going through Mach 1, and Mach 1 is the speed of sound. It's breaking the speed of sound. And it also is about where the maximum amount of pressure is pushing down on the vehicle. Think of this vehicle going up, and this cone is going into the atmosphere, and it's going faster and faster, and the atmosphere is just pushing back harder and harder. There's a point to where it reaches some maximum amount of pressure pushing straight down on the vehicle. After that, the vehicle gets higher, the air gets less dense, so there's less push. So the dynamic pressure starts out kind of low, goes up, and comes back down. But at maximum dynamic pressure, the vehicle's got to be going straight, not sideways, not like this. If it's like this and the air is pushing on the side, it can actually break the vehicle in half. So you want the vehicle to be going straight without turning at maximum dynamic pressure. Once you get to orbit, Earth orbit, and you want to get out of orbit and go to the moon, you need some more guidance equations to say, well, where should I be going? Well, these are what the guidance equations look like that go to the moon. First, you've got to have something that tells you when to start the burn out of orbit. Secondly, where to steer it. Third, when to turn it off. We'll talk about all these things in more detail later. Here's the lunar surface. You notice here's some craters and things here and here. Here it looks like kind of a flat area. And so this is where it was chosen that the Apollo 11 would land. Here's the equator of the moon. I have a lunar globe here. When you're leaving, if you want to take a look right here, is a picture. I took this picture of the globe, so it looks exactly like this. Right here, the lettering is on it where the Apollo landed, the first landing on the moon. When the vehicle touched down on the moon, Neil Armstrong was on the radio, and he radios back. He says the Eagle has landed. The name of the landing vehicle that landed on the moon was called the Eagle. He was telling Mission Control that they had landed on the moon. This was left on the moon. On one leg of the landing vehicle, wrapped around it, see this kind of curve, is this little plaque that says, "Here, men, from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon in July 1969, we came in peace for all mankind." Here's the three astronauts' signatures. Richard Nixon was president of it. Here are the patches for all the Apollo missions. Started with 7 that went up around the Earth to check out the service module. The next one was Apollo 8, This one circled the moon and took all the pictures behind the moon. In fact, it mapped the entire surface of the moon, so the first time we could have a complete globe, front and back of the moon. Because I know y'all know that the same face of the moon faces the Earth all the time. So nobody had ever seen behind the moon before. And then the next mission went up into Earth orbit again and checked out the service module and the lunar lander and docking maneuvers and make sure everything was working. Then they did another flight where they actually burned the lunar lander in Earth orbit. And then it was time to do the big triangular landing, which was Apollo 11. And you can see the eagle, the emblem there. Of course, this was successful. 12 was successful. 13 was the one that had the fuel cell explode and they had to come back. And then there was 14, 15, 16, 17, and that was the end of the lunar landing missions. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lunar landings where we actually got to the moon and walked on the moon and collected rocks and did research relative to the moon. Have y'all been to the Smithsonian Institute Aerospace Museum? Remember this? Mural on the wall. Here's that guy. Looks just like me, standing there. It is me. Here's the astronaut. He's got his digging tool. There's a flag. Here's a lunar rover. There's another astronaut. The vehicle they landed in. And I guess this is kind of like fireworks back there. Did you ever figure out what that was? I never did. I never did figure out exactly what that was supposed to be, but there it is. That's really a big mural. Here's a lunar rover. You can see, here's the antenna. It's got 3 legs. It's sitting here on the moon for communication. Looks like a TV antenna. Here's one on the vehicle itself. And of course, it's got 4 wheels. And here's the astronaut carrying that big old pack. You think that's really heavy on the moon?
No.
Boy, y'all are really smart. The moon gravity is 1/6 that here it is on the Earth. If you weigh 140 pounds on the Earth, you'd weigh 23 pounds on the moon. You could jump a long ways, couldn't you?
That helps you. I know. Oh, you jump. He's jumping too high.
Here's another picture of the shuttle
Bye, guys.
in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Huntsville, Alabama deal. You've been there, you've seen this. And here's somebody standing here, right here. You can see how large this is. This is the actual size of the shuttle there. And here's the shuttle coming back home to the Cape. It's been out in California. 747, bolted on top. Air Force making sure everything's going okay. I always thought that was a neat picture. Here we go. How many would like to go on a spacewalk? I would. No up, no down, no gravity. The only thing is you have to work on the Hubble telescope. Here's a picture of the Ares that just lifted off, 16th of this month. It's skinnier than the Saturn V, but it's about the same height. It's sitting on the crawler still, but they're getting it in position to put it on a launch pad. And here it is, lifting off. Notice that Saturn V, you can see the same shape right here. It's the same launch pad as was used for the Saturn V 40 years ago. Pad 19, 29, 39. I think somebody said that was right. 39, I think. Launch pad 39. Okay, now, with that background, we are ready for blast off. Of course, to get to the moon, we need our rocket. What do you think of that? The mighty Saturn V, it's called.
What about the other one?
That's a show. Yeah, we'll fly that one too. We're going to go to the moon first. Okay. Now the Saturn V has the launch tower out here that we saw in the picture. And the first thing it does, lifts off, and once it clears the tower, gets this high, then it's going to do a roll maneuver in order to get ready to pitch over. And the reason why, there's one of these pins on here on the bottom, it's called a number one pin. And it's positioned so that it rolls until the number one pin points in the direction it's going to pitch over. And then it stops rolling, and then it pitches over when it's passed on up to orbit, like this. So, we listen here, we can hear the countdown.
10, 9, 8, ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Oh, hear that? The engine started. Here we go. We just had some smoke. Here we go. It takes 12 seconds to clear the tower. So it starts pretty slow. And then we're going to do our roll. We're going to roll over here. We'll count this pin, number one. And then we start up and up, and we start pitching over like this. And we go like this for about, we get up to about, we got the wrong one here. Got my little cheat sheet. Okay, we're going to get up here. The first thing that's going to happen in about a minute and 23 seconds or so, we're going to have that maximum dynamic pressure that comes straight down in the vehicle. So we want to be going straight through the atmosphere. And at that point, we're doing about 2,000 feet per second. That's as fast as some bullets travel, 2,000 feet per second. So it's a pretty good speed. And then when we get to about at about 2 minutes and 40 seconds or so, about 2.5 minutes after we get up here, we're going pretty fast, and first stage runs out of fuel. It comes off right here. This one drops off into the ocean and sinks. The second one ignites. By the way, the first one, you notice it has the 5 engines here. Biggest rocket engines ever made. Each one of them is 1.5 million pounds of thrust each. Times 5, that's 7.5 million pounds that it pushes. The total rocket weighs about 6 million. So you've got 6 million weight, you've got 7.5 pushing, it's going to go up. It's got to be more than it weighs. And so it's going up. Then that runs out of fuel, and then what we call the S2 stage ignites. It has 5 engines also. These are smaller engines. They're smaller engines, but there's 5 of them. And so these start to burn. It goes a little further, and then this right here is blown off. This is another little rocket engine that attaches to the command module. And the reason why is the astronauts are up here in this little cone-shaped thing at the very top. And this fastens onto them, so if something goes wrong during ascent, this could ignite and pull them away from the rocket. But after a while, they say, well, we don't need that anymore, it's too late. So we're left with this. We're still going through the atmosphere, and a little later, this engine, this part runs out of fuel. It comes off, falls into the ocean and sinks. And that leaves the third stage, which has a single rocket engine. It ignites and keeps the vehicle going until this configuration here reaches Earth orbit. So let's review here what we're doing. What Project Apollo is all about. We have the Earth, and we have the moon out here. And what we've done is lifted off from the Cape. We've gone into Earth orbit, circular orbit here with this configuration right here. That's what we've accomplished so far. The moon is moving this direction, and we're in Earth orbit. And what we're going to do, we're going to come around to here, and we're going to reignite this engine to get us out of Earth orbit, headed towards the moon. And when we do that, we're going to fly past it looks like this. Now, this is going to take 3 days of coast time. We run from here to here. We cut off here. We coast here for 3 days. And at the end of that time, what do we want to see? We want to see the moon. And you can tell the moon is going to move from here to here on those 3 days. So when we talk about targeting, we talk about where we want to go. When we leave Earth orbit here and cut off here, we want to aim for this point right here, even though the moon is still down here. Now, it's mathematics and knowing where all these objects are, like the Earth and the moon and the sun, and how gravity works and everything, that we put all these in computers and calculate all this stuff so that we know where to go. Once we get to lunar orbit, we're going to slow down and go into a circular orbit around the moon. And then at some point, we're going to slow down some more, go down to the surface of the moon, get out and walk on the moon, come back up into lunar orbit again, and then we're going to do another burnout of lunar orbit and come back to the Earth after we coast 3 days back. When we're in Earth orbit, we're doing about 25,000 feet per second. When we start towards the moon, we're doing about 36,000 feet per second. Now, 36,000 feet per second. That doesn't mean a whole lot, but if you had a gun and you shot it and looked at how fast the bullet was going, it'd be going about 3,000 feet per second. So this is 12 times faster than a bullet. Right here. And it still takes 3 days to get to the moon. Who knows how far it is to the moon?
Whoa.
240,000 miles. So it takes a little while. So here we are. We're in Earth orbit. We're getting ready to go out. We reignite this. We blast off. We're coming out of Earth orbit. We're going 36,000 feet per second. And now we cut off and we're coasting towards the moon. What happens next? This service module, it's called, separates from the main vehicle like this. Then, this main vehicle opens up the doors, just like that, just like a pedal, opens it up. The astronauts turn this around. Remember, we're floating through space. Come back, they dock here, and they pull the lunar lander away from this vehicle, like this. This right here now has some small rockets on the back. They fire up, point it towards the sun, and this goes up through space, enters the sun, and burns up. These other two sink to the bottom of the ocean. This one goes to the sun. All except for Apollo 11, the first one. They kind of missed a little bit, and this one ran into the moon. So there's one of these crash landed on the moon, but the rest of them made it to the sun. Okay. So now we have this configuration floating through space. We have the service module, we have the command module, we have the lunar lander, descent, and ascent. Now, when we get to the moon, we're turned around like this, with this engine pointed this way, and we're coming in like this, and this engine ignites and slows us down so that we go into a circular orbit around the moon. So now we're in a circular orbit around the moon with this. What happens next is that the two astronauts, Armstrong and Aldrin, they crawl through this opening here from the command module into the lunar lander module, and they separate like this. That leaves Collins here going around the moon, and they're also going around the moon. They're just in front of it. Okay. Now, what they do then is if we're going to land, we open up our legs a little more. 4 legs. Here's the landing site here. We're traveling across the surface of the moon, and we're coming down into a lower orbit. And at this point, if you look at this lunar lander right here, and look right at the front, and you see the 2 black window-looking things on each side there? We say it looks kind of like a bug. 2 eyes, 2 black eyes sticking out there. Those are windows. Those are the windows. And Armstrong's on the left, Aldrin's on the right. They can see out this window. They're standing up. There's nothing to set down in the limb. Remember, there's no gravity now. They're just in orbit. and they're standing up, and they're flying in this configuration on their back, looking straight up into the black sky. There's no atmosphere on the moon, so there's nothing to reflect light, so it's absolutely black when you look out into space. And they're like this, and they're going to land over there. So here's a rocket down at the bottom of this. And guess what's going to happen now? This rocket's going to fire up. It's going to start slowing them down. And it does. It starts slowing down this horizontal velocity. Okay? They've got gravity, so it starts dropping. Gets down to about 10,000 feet, pitches up like this. The first time they can see the surface of the moon, and they can see the landing site. And now the rocket's starting to slow down their downward velocity, and it's pitched up like this, so it's slowing down the horizontal also. And Armstrong is looking out the window at where they're going to land. What does he see? Well, on the window, on his window of the limb, there's a crosshair in there, it's just like this. And it has these little marks on it, just like this. And when he looks out the window, right here is where the little descent's going to land. It's where the computer's going to land the vehicle, right there. Now he has a joystick sitting there, just like your game joystick. If he pushes it forward one time, it changes the landing site to what he sees right here. Pushes it twice, it changes it to right there. Pushes it right once, it changes it to there. When he does that, the vehicle will reorient to move this position back to the center. So what he's looking at the center is always where the computer's going to land. Well, he looks out the center, and what does he see? He sees these big, big rocks. It's supposed to be smooth. Something didn't quite get taken in the picture. And there's these big rocks, 6 foot tall. And he goes, what do you think he said? Uh-oh. So he said, I'd better land somewhere else. Well, he looks up, and he sees 3 clicks down, looks real smooth. So what he did, he went click, click, click. Spacecraft reoriented and said, okay, that's where I'm going to land, in the smooth part. Okay, now, he's coming in for a landing. And Buzz Aldrin has a real important job to do. That's to tell him how things are going. And he says, if you look up on the internet, if you look up something that says lunar landing audio, something like that, audio of his voice, you can hear the conversation that's going on from Aldrin to Armstrong. And what he's saying is something like down 6, down 4.5, drifting to the right, down 3, right 4. What that is, it means down 4.5 feet per second, down 6 feet per second, to the right 2 feet per second. And then at one point he says 60 seconds. That means he's got 60 seconds to fuel that. He's either got to land or abort and go back up to orbit without landing on the moon. Because you've only got so much fuel, you get a certain amount of time. So he comes down, he gets down closer, and he lands on the moon. And the first thing he says is the Eagle has landed. You can hear all that. That's on the internet. So give it a try. So they get out, they walk around for a few hours, they get back in. Then, here comes Collins. He's been up here the whole time circling the moon. Going around, twiddling his thumbs, worrying that something's going to happen to him. And he comes back, and now what happens is that this top module has a rocket engine on it. This becomes the launch pad. And at the right time, according to the guidance equations, they ignite. Here comes Collins, comes up into orbit. And they end up close together so that now they can turn around and dock back together like this. And so now Collins and Armstrong and Aldrin crawl through the opening here back into the command module, and now they're in circular Earth orbit like this. They return from the moon. Now, with their rocks and whatever else they did. Now, at this point, we're going around the moon like this, and they get oriented like this, and they come around here, this engine reignites again on the service module, picks up speed, gets them out of orbit, and now they coast and it goes for 3 days to get back to the Earth. Along the way, they said, well, we don't need this anymore. This goes off into space. That's their lunar lander. Neither do they need, once they do the mid-course correction to make sure they're on the right path, neither do they need the command module. This goes away, and what's left is this little thing right here. Remember what we started with, this huge big rocket? This is what we return with. Like a cone, 3 astronauts are in here, and it has asbestos stuff on the bottom, and they start into the atmosphere this way, and the center of gravity is slightly off on this cone. And what that means is if it comes, when it comes in the first way, it causes it to actually tilt a little bit and dig into the atmosphere. And what they're trying to do is kill a lot of velocity to make sure they don't skip out. So it digs into the atmosphere. Remember, they've been in 0 gravity for 3 days. They've just been floating through space. Suddenly, the force of gravity increases to 6 times what it is on Earth. They feel like they weigh 840 pounds. And they're having to endure this, and about the time it gets there, it rolls 180 degrees, produces lift, actually starts back up out of the atmosphere a little bit, and the amount of gravity goes down to 3, which is only 3 times your normal weight. And then the aircraft carrier is down here, and that's what they're trying to get to. And so by rotating this command module, if they rotate it perpendicular like this, it will fly to the right. They rotate it back the other way, it will fly to the left. And the whole time it's losing speed and going down because it doesn't have wings, it's just that. And they go back and forth like this, adjusting these rolls. The computer does it. And while all the time looking at the range downrange until they get down close to the aircraft carrier, then the parachutes pop open, they land in the water, they send out the helicopters, and they get them out of the capsule, and there they are. And can you see the astronauts in the capsule there? There's 3 of them, and that's where they ride.
It looks like little white flames or something. It's kind of hard to see. Hi. What is that?
It's not permission to talk.
Okay, and that was Project Apollo. That's how we got to the moon and safely back. I bet it had more pieces to it than we thought. And the shuttle is of course this this configuration. We have sets on the pad like this. We're going to go downrange like this. Lifts off. Have y'all ever seen it where it rolls 180 degrees? This is the opposite direction, but it rolls 180 degrees like this before it starts pitching. You ever notice that? Well, at first they thought they were going to fly like this. But then they found out that if they roll like this, they had a little bit of lift and they could get to orbit with less fuel. So they roll 180 degrees. It pitches over like this. These are solid propellants in these tanks. A solid propellant gives you a little more thrust than liquid propellant. Remember we said we have liquid hydrogen and oxygen here. We have oxygen and kerosene-like material in this one. But you can control the thrust if you have liquid fuel. You can't if you have solid. So these just simply burn as fast as they can and put out as much push as they can until they burn out. Then they come off and the parachutes come out and they recover these so they can reuse them. And then we have the big tank of the liquid hydrogen and oxygen. It feeds through a tube down here and goes out the back of the shuttle. And it continues on up until it almost gets to orbit. Then this comes off. And then the shuttle, this goes down with a parachute. And then the shuttle continues on to orbit and ends up into orbit like this. And then it turns around like we normally see it, has the cargo bay, whatever's in there. And can dock with the space station, repair the Hubble telescope, whatever they're going to do. And then when they get ready to come back, they get turned around like this, and they burn this to slow down. And then as they start to slow down, they turn around like this and come into the atmosphere like this with an angle, because this is where the heat absorbing material is. And when they get down fairly low, they do their flare up like this to get the speed down where they want it, and then turn back over like this and land at about 220 miles an hour. Fairly fast for a landing, but it's a pretty heavy aircraft without a lot of lift. And you only have one chance to land this thing, of course. Oh yeah, it does. The wheels come out right here, the little black things there. I glued these on, I didn't leave the wheels. Okay. Now, any questions? Uh-oh. Okay.
Have you been in space before?
Have I been in space? No, I haven't. No. I was an engineer. I worked on the guidance equations.
Why, like, wouldn't it be polluting if you put, like, all that extra stuff in the ocean? Like, that extra stuff and it fell into the ocean, wouldn't that be polluting?
Oh, polluting? Well, I guess so. We didn't think that much about it. I mean, you know, these things are awfully big, and once they hit the water, they weren't designed to survive. I mean, you know, salt water will cause a lot of damage if something's not survived to survive in salt water. And there were only 6 of them, but they did hit the water and sink. They're down at the bottom of the ocean somewhere. Maybe they make a good home for some fish. Oh, it's ready to take off.
Okay, guys. One more question, okay, one more question because we are ready to go. We have 2 minutes. As you said, we are taking off. Okay.
We used to, this part of the vehicle, they would fly down to Huntsville, Alabama in a 747. It fits inside of a 747. And they would take it out and take it down to the test stand and test fly there in Huntsville. And then they put it back on the airplane and fly it down to the place.
If one day you have the opportunity to go, and you say, I haven't dismissed classes, guys. Nobody move. Sit down, please. The teacher dismissed the class. You don't walk away with the teacher dismissed the class. You better learn that, guys. You see, no one in my class moved. They know better. Okay, guys. I hope you have the opportunity and one day to go to the museum, go to NASA, and please, at this moment, let's go give a big hand for Mr. Cooper. Thank you.
Down in Florida. Okay, there we go. We got a couple. Did you see it launch? Okay. Well, you were down there, though. I've been down there. I haven't seen the launch down there. We launched and they were going to Earth orbit. Then we come out of Earth orbit, go to the moon, land on the moon, take off from the moon, get back into lunar orbit, and then come back to the Earth. That's the way the Apollo mission was planned. We'll go through this in detail and show you how it's done. First of all, in order to have some astronauts, NASA asked for some volunteers. About 75 pilots, they were all pilots at the time, volunteered, and they chose 7. Here are the original 7 astronauts. As they're standing by their jet airplane down at Ellington Air Force Base. Some of y'all been down to the air show down there? There you go. You know where it is then. Just down the road a little way. That's where they're standing. Here's the first man we ever put into space. Here's John Glenn, first one to do an orbital flight. U.S. Senator. This is the rocket that took us towards the moon. This is a 3-story building. You can see it's 367 feet tall, I believe. 363 feet tall. If somebody were standing right here, here's the lower engine right here. They would barely come up, their head would barely come up to this. About 6 feet here. You can see it's a very tall vehicle. Has 5 engines on the first stage. Here's one of the engines. You can see how big it is. There's a person. See how large that is. These are the largest rocket engines ever built, and 4 of them, and 5 of them were put together at the bottom of the Saturn V. Here's what landed on the moon. Here's the lunar lander. Here's the compartment that the astronauts were in. It has 4 legs. 1, 2, 3, and there's one right back behind. It's hard to see. There's the ladder they climbed down to the moon. This picture was taken at the Rocket and Space Museum in Huntsville, Alabama. Have any of y'all been to that museum? You get a chance, go. They have a lot of rockets there. These are some of the other missiles at Huntsville. This is the missile right here that put Alan Shepard up into the first manned flight that the United States ever put up. And these are other Army missiles here. They're going to land on the ground here. Here's the Redstone. This is the Redstone, the Mercury Redstone, the first rocket that put a man into space for the United States. You can see the distinctive markings at the top, these vertical black lines. Here's the capsule up here. This shot was taken back in probably 1953 or so in White Sands, New Mexico, where they were built and tested. You can see the desert black out here. See how simple the launch pad is? It's just a piece of steel down here to hold it, and fired it up and hope it went in the right direction. They did it out at White Sands in the desert because they didn't know what direction it was going to go for sure every time. In order to get from Earth launch pad at the Cape into Earth orbit, you have to have some equations on board that the onboard computer calculates to see what direction the vehicle should go in order to get into the orbit that you want it to be in. This is what they look like for the Saturn. There's some initial calculations here, and then these equations here are the ones that actually calculate the amount you want the vehicle to be tilted over, and if you need to fly sideways in some direction. You may take off and want to go into this certain plane, but you're really not in that plane when you lift off, so therefore you have to fly a little bit sideways to get into the orbit that you want to. Here are the 3 astronauts that first landed on the moon. Y'all ever heard of Neil Armstrong? This Neil right there. This guy right here, Buzz Aldrin. Probably heard of him. And here's the guy we kind of forget, Michael Collins. He was the spacecraft commander, and he was the one that didn't go down to the moon. Aldrin and Armstrong landed on the moon. Now, all of these men were test pilots. All of them came out of the military one way or another. But the other thing they had was really a good education. If we look here at Robert Goddard, he's the father of American space program rockets. He's the first one in the United States to start building rockets using liquid propellants and testing rockets and believed that they really meant something and should be pursued. And he had a PhD in physics. Werner Brown Brown, the guy that was responsible for building that giant rocket I showed you that got us to the moon, came from Germany with a PhD in physics. Commander Neil Armstrong, the pilot that landed on the moon, has a master's degree from the University of Southern California in aeronautics. The command module, Michael Collins, graduated from West Point. Buzz Aldrin had a PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in aerospace engineering. So the lesson to be an astronaut or to participate in a good way in any scientific program is to get all the education you can, and therefore you'll be ready when the opportunity comes. These, out of 75 people, there were only 3 that went to the moon the first time. And one reason they went to the moon was because of their education as much as anything. Here's the Saturn V lifting off from the launch pad. It's probably ignited about 2 seconds ago. You can see the flames coming out here. All the smoke that's been thrown up already from the exhaust. The tower is here. The arms are back from the tire. This right here is swung back the other direction. The astronauts are located right here at the very top in the command module. And it's just starting to lift off. It takes 12 seconds to go from here to there. Starts off fairly slow, but picks up speed pretty fast. Here it is after about a minute. You can see this little white circle right here. As the rocket goes through the atmosphere, let's take this, use this one as an example. This is a rocket going up. As it goes up through the atmosphere and it goes faster and faster, the air pressure, the resistance to it flying through the air pushes harder and harder on the front of it. And there comes a point to where it presses as hard as it's going to, because after that, it's going to be going out of the atmosphere, so there's going to be less molecules, so it's not going to press so hard. But it starts out at 0 when the velocity is low, builds up speed, presses real hard, then it falls off. When it presses the hardest is when the vehicle is in the most danger of coming apart. If it's flying sideways, where there's some pressure on the side, you very easily break a space vehicle in half. So you want it to fly straight through the atmosphere with no turning at that point. And when you go through Mach 1, with speed of sound, you can actually see the shock wave that happens around this part of the vehicle. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon. Now, in order to get out of Earth orbit to head towards the moon, you need some more guidance equations. You need to know where you're going to go and how you're going to get there. And you need to know when to ignite the rocket engine to push you out of orbit. You got to know when to cut off. And you got to know the direction you got to be heading. So the direction we're going to head is towards the moon. We're going to land right near the equator. In this area here, you see kind of rocky, kind of like mountains over here and here. And right here is smooth. It's called the Sea of Tranquility. And this is where the Apollo 11 landed on July the 20th, 1969. And here's a lunar globe. When you leave it, you want to drop by. Light's kind of dim, but right here, I took a picture of this globe, so I know this is what it looks like. That's a picture of this globe right here. And right there are the words that show where the first lunar landing was. First thing Neil Armstrong said when the vehicle sat down on the moon, he said, "The Eagle has landed." The reason why is the name of the vehicle is called the Eagle. So he was telling Mission Control that I've landed on the moon. Here's what we left on the moon. On one of the legs of the lunar lander was this plaque. Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969. We came in peace for all mankind. Here are the 3 astronauts, and there's Richard Nixon, who was the president at the time. Here are all the Apollo mission patches. Started with Apollo 7, which went into Earth orbit and tested the service module. 8 was interesting in that it went out and went around the moon, took pictures of the backside of the moon for the first time. We knew what the back of the moon looked like. Completely mapped the moon so we can have a lunar globe that shows all the mountains and all the craters and everything on the whole moon. Of course, what they were looking for was a good place to land. And they found that smooth spot on the front. So that's how they chose the landing site for the first one. Then the second flight tested some more into orbit, tested more in Earth orbit, and then came the big one, 11, the Eagle. You can see here, this was the first landing on the moon. Then there was 12 that landed on the moon, 13 that had the fuel cell that blew up and had to come back, and 14 landed, 15, 16, and 17. They all landed. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lunar missions that actually landed on the moon out of 7 attempts. Here's at the Smithsonian Institute. Have y'all been there and seen this mural on the wall? There you go. You recognize it? Big, big mural. Here's an astronaut, digging tool, flag, even bigger, that guy standing there. That looks like me. It is me. Here's a rover vehicle. See the 4 there. There's the astronaut, the spacecraft. And I suppose this is fireworks. I'm not sure what this is, but it looks kind of like fireworks there. Never could figure that out. Here's the lunar rover again. Here's a antenna to communicate with the Earth that's sitting on the ground. Looks like a TV antenna. Here's another one on the rover. There's the 4 wheels you can see. And the astronaut is here carrying this big, heavy pack. You think that thing weighs a lot? Well, you guys are really smart. Gravity, the moon is smaller than the Earth. The gravity is 1/6 what the Earth has. So if you weigh 140 pounds here, you'll weigh 23 pounds on the Earth. You could really jump a long ways, couldn't you? Or if you jump, and you see the astronauts, have you seen pictures where they kind of hop along, you know? They're so light. They take a step and they actually come off the surface and they kind of look like they're hopping. Here's another picture of one of the vehicles in Huntsville, Alabama. It shows the shuttle here. There's somebody standing right here. You can see how large that is when you stand right next to it. I always like this picture. Here's the 747 taking the shuttle back to the Cape. Just bolt it on top, slide down there. Jet falling along, make sure everything's okay. Here we go, spacewalk. I know we'd all like to go on a spacewalk. No gravity, no up, no down. The thing is, they put you to work. You're working on a Hubble telescope there. Here's the Aries that flew the 16th of this month. You notice it's really tall and skinny. It's about as high as the Saturn V, but it's only 20 foot in diameter instead of 33 feet, so it's even skinnier than the Saturn. Here it is lifting off. So, now with that background, we are ready to go to the moon. Of course, all we need now is the mighty Saturn V. When the Saturn V lifts off, the nucleus starts, it goes straight up, it clears the tower. It takes about 12 seconds to clear the tower to get this far off the ground. Then it does a roll to get in the right position to tilt over to go to Earth orbit. And there's a fin here called fin number 1, and what it does, it rolls until that fin points down range the direction you want it to go, and it tilts over. Now for 3 different adjustments of your velocity to make sure you got to the right place here. And what do you want to do here? When you get to here, you want to go into lunar orbit. Then you're going to land, you're going to come back, and then you're going to burn out of this orbit and come back to the Earth. So let's do that part. Right here, we're right here. We've ignited this vehicle, we've blasted out of Earth orbit, and we're coasting towards the moon. And the first thing that happens is the astronauts separate this stage. This comes out. The next thing that happens is that the doors open. This is called the S4B stage. Just like the pedals on a flight. They're coasting along, turn this around, come back and dock with this and pull the lunar lander out of this vehicle here. This vehicle now has some small rockets on the back. They fire up, point this towards the sun to get it away from this because we don't want both of these arriving at the moon. This goes towards the sun to enter the sun's gravitational field, which will absorb it and burn it up. Now, unfortunately, the first Apollo 11, and miscalculated a little bit, and it's hit the moon on the way to the sun. So we have one of these on the moon that's crash landed, but the rest of them did go to the sun for the other flights. Now we have this configuration going through space. And here we go towards the moon. We're going up here, and when we get to here, this rocket ignites. This is called a service module. This ignites, slows it down, and goes into Earth orbit. Lunar orbit. Now we're in lunar orbit, going around the moon. Aldrin and Armstrong crawl from this command module into the lunar lander, and then they separate. So now both of these are in lunar orbit. Now what happens, I suppose this is our landing site down here, our nice smooth site. They open up the legs, getting ready to land, check everything out. Now you see the command module, you see these windows on the front, there's a kind of a black one there and a black one there. It's kind of like a bug face. You see a bug like that? Kind of reminds me of a bug. But these are windows, and this is where they see out. When they come across, when they're in circular orbit, though, they're kind of like, you think they're on their back, there's no gravity, but this is pointed up, so they're looking out away from the moon. They cannot see the surface of the moon. They're standing up. There's no place to lay down or sit in the limb. They're just standing up, looking out the window. And they're coming across, and they're going to land over here, so this rocket ignites to slow down their horizontal velocity like this. And it starts to slow down. As it does, even though it's 1/6 gravity, it starts to fall. And it falls till they get to about 10,000 feet above the surface. When that happens, now this is under computer control. The computer turns it up like this, which now directs most of the thrust down to stop the downward velocity. They don't have a whole lot of horizontal velocity to kill, so it's still angle like this to kill some. And they're starting down. And now Armstrong, for the first time, can see the surface of the moon and the landing site. And what does he see? Well, on the window, on the left window, which he's looking out, there are crosshairs just like this. And they're marked. Just like this. When he looks right here, this is where he's going to land. He looks right through these little crosshairs and looks at the moon. That's where the computer is going to land the vehicle. And what does he see? He sees these giant rocks, 6 foot and 10 feet in diameter. Well, I bet he said something like, uh-oh, this is not good. But he looks up here and he can see that it looks smooth on down this way, further down. Well, now he has a joystick, just like you have with your games. You push it forward, sideways, right, back, and if you push it forward, it changes the landing site to what he's looking at right here. If you push it again, it's 2 clicks, and it lands there. 3 clicks, it lands there. So, what does he do? He's a good pilot. He goes click, click, click. Now he's headed towards the smooth part to land in. That's exactly what he does. If you get on the internet and search for something that says lunar landing, audio, something like that, you can hear Buzz Aldrin talking to Armstrong as they're landing this vehicle on the moon. And what he's telling him very important information. He's telling him how fast it's going down and how high he is and how much fuel he has. He only has a certain amount of fuel, so he must land in a certain amount of time in a smooth area, or abort and go back up to lunar orbit and not land. You can't just stay around and hunt for a landing site forever. There's a time limitation. So you'll hear things like 6.5 down, 2 to the right, 10 down, 5,000 feet, something like that, like the altitude. And one time you'll hear 60 seconds. That means 60 seconds of fuel left. You either got to land, you got to make up your mind, land, or we got to get out of here. Okay, he's coming down. Well, fortunately, he comes down, he makes a perfect landing, which is about 3.5 feet per second down. He lands on the surface, and he radios back to Houston. He says, Houston, the Eagle has landed. Everybody's excited, they applaud, and now we wonder, what's going to happen now? Well, they get out, they walk around the moon for a few hours, they collect some rocks, they bring them back, and here's Collins the whole time. Going around the moon. And then at the right time, the ignition, the upper stage here, this becomes the launch pad, and this rocket in this part ignites. Remember, there's a rocket down here too, but we don't need that anymore. This ignites, starts up. Here comes the spacecraft around. It's going up. It's headed into orbit like this, and they get up here and they get pretty close, and they do what's called the rendezvous, and they dock back like this together. two astronauts climb out of here back into the command module. Now all three of them are back together again. And now they're in circular orbit around the moon, and they get lined up like this. They reignite this rocket here, pushes them out of Earth orbit, and now they're headed back to the Earth. 3 days to coast, coming back. Along the way, they get rid of the descent module, the ascent module. They don't need that anymore. They also don't need the service module anymore because it's gotten out of Earth orbit. That's the last time they need that. That goes away. This is what's left. Remember that big, huge rocket we had sitting here? This is what we managed to get back after everything is used up, after all the fuel and rockets. This has asbestos on the bottom. It's floating through space. It's getting ready to enter the atmosphere. The center of gravity is offset a little bit so that when it rotates, it causes it to fly a little bit like an airplane, even though it doesn't have any wings. So when it starts in, it's turned so that it digs into the atmosphere, slows it down. The trouble is the amount of G's build up. G's mean how many more times heavier do you feel than normal. When they start in, they get up to 6 times normal. They feel like they weigh 840 pounds. If you get to 10, you die. So they're not going to do that. When they get to 6, they roll 180 degrees. It actually lifts up out of the atmosphere. The G's go back down to about 3. Now they're feeling pretty good. They only weigh 550 pounds now. And then the aircraft carrier is down here that they're trying to get to downrange. And so what happens is the computer rolls at 90 degrees and it kind of flies out to the left, and then they roll it 180 and it flies back to the right, roll it back again, it flies to the left. All the time it's losing altitude, losing speed. They're flying back and forth, and by controlling when they roll back and forth, they can control how far downrange they're going to go. And that's how they determine where they get to. When they get down to here, parachutes come out, flop in the ocean, helicopters come out, they pop open the door, and we have returned the 3 astronauts safely to Earth. See 'em? Did you see them in there?
We're So you hate your lover.
Okay, not quite finished. That was Project Apollo. That's how we got to the moon and back. You've probably heard about it, you've seen bits and pieces, but you probably never knew there were that many pieces to it. Now we have the shuttle. These are the same scale, and you can see the shuttle is quite a bit shorter than the Saturn V was. It starts like this, lifts off, does its roll maneuver, and if you watch it on television or watch it on the internet, you'll see it starts like this. It does a 180-degree roll, and then pitches over like this to go to orbit. The reason why it does, it gets a little more lift this way. They thought at first they'd go this way, and then they found out it gets more lift when it goes this way, which requires a little less fuel. So it rolls over like this and goes up into orbit like this. And as soon as these burn out, which are solid propellants, you get more thrust out of per pound for a solid propellant than you do liquid, but you can't control the thrust. These just burn full blast until they run out. Then they have parachutes and they recover them. Now we're still going with our liquid propellant here that runs through the tanks out the back. And then it comes off at some point. Okay, this is recovered, and then the shuttle gets into orbit like this, and then it rolls over, and then they do the docking, whatever they're going to do. And then later on, when it wants to come back, it's coming across in this orbit like this. These ignite, slow it down, and then it turns back around and comes into the atmosphere like this. And when it gets down fairly low, flares up, y'all seen that maneuver, and it comes in like this, and tilts over, and lands at about 220 miles per hour. the parachutes come out and slow it down. And they always make a perfect landing, which shows how good those pilots are. Okay, and that's how the shuttle works, and the Ares is very much like the Apollo, only it's skinnier. See, this is 33 feet, so the Ares would be about 2/3 this, and it would be real skinny. I hope you get one of those models for tomorrow. Any questions?
If they don't recover the pieces to the Apollo one?
No, we didn't recover anything on the Apollo. They just fell in the ocean and sunk to the bottom. That was one of the objectives of the shuttle, is to develop a reusable space vehicle, something that could fly more than once. The Apollo, everything just flew once, and that's it. Next flight was a completely new.
How long did it take to like you can't see the thing going up and down?
To what?
The thing that's going up, how long did it take to you can't see it?
To what?
Like when it's going up, there's like a time when you can't see it anymore. How long did it take?
Oh, can't see it anymore? Probably a couple of minutes. You know, the Saturn took 11.5 minutes to get to orbit. The shuttle makes it about 8.5. So what that tells you is the shuttle really goes faster. It has these solid propellants all the way, and it's smaller. It has more thrust relative to its weight, so it really goes faster. But when it starts to get up to maximum dynamic pressure, the shuttle actually throttles back the engines to slow down. Goes through that portion slower, then picks up speed again, then puts more thrust in. So these are variable here, whereas the Saturn didn't have any variable thrusters on the booster. And so, but the shuttle zips up there a little faster than the Saturn does. But you know, after a while, I mean, you can kind of see the smoke, but after a while, you don't see much.
Is Neil Armstrong still alive?
Yes, he is.
He's still alive?
He teaches physics at, I'm thinking Purdue University. That's where he graduated at. That may not be quite true. Kansas City or Purdue or somewhere.
I thought he had like died like 2 years ago. But I thought he had like died for like 2 years ago, but then I was always thinking that I wasn't sure because then it would be all over the news. And things like
No,
that.
I believe he's still alive. He is a very private person. He does not give interviews. He never written a book. He just does not appear in public. Not written.
Which one was more expensive?
What?
Which one was more expensive? The Saturn or the shuttle?
Oh, more expensive? The shuttle program overall is more expensive than the Saturn program. The Saturn only had, you know, like we said, 10 flights or so, whereas the shuttle has been up many, many times. The cost to put up a vehicle, thousands of people work on it between times and everything. It costs.
Okay, guys, thank you very much to Mr. Cooper. Please. You know, we went all the way to the moon and we make it back safely. And you know that we have, science is very interesting, very important, but the most important is to have the education. The whole point basically here, get you education, and when the opportunity presents, you will be there. Nobody move! Remember, the teacher dismissed the class. Okay. The 7th graders, you can go.
I'm 7th grade.
Mr. Willie for class, you can go. My class, you can go. Miss Moy class, you can go. You feel it?
Turn it what? You what?
Who knows what the Apollo program was? All right.
Apollo 13 was when the first person went to the moon.
Okay, Apollo 13. The Apollo program itself, the objective was to get to the moon and back safely. Now, Apollo 13, if you're familiar with, was the one that had the explosion on board and they had to come back and they didn't make it to the moon. That was part of the Apollo program. First, I wanted to show you some pictures and review the program, the United States rocket program. Project Apollo launches from the Earth, goes into Earth orbit, comes out of Earth orbit, goes to the moon, goes down to the surface of the moon, then comes back to Earth. That's the objective of the Apollo program. In order to have astronauts on the Apollo program, you need some astronauts. NASA asked for volunteers, and about 75 test pilots, who was the only people who were eligible at the time, volunteered. And out of those, NASA chose 7. Here are the 7 original astronauts for Apollo 11. You might know the name John Glenn, who became U.S. Senator. He was an original Apollo astronaut. This is the rocket that got us to the moon. It's called the Saturn V. Saturn V is about 363 feet tall. This is a 3-story building. If you stood down here at the base, you wouldn't reach the first engine right here, between there and the ground. There are 5 rocket engines at the bottom of the Saturn V in the first stage. Here's an example of one. There's a person right there. You can see how big these things are. There's one of them. There's 5 of them in total. You can see some of the ones here. Have you all been out to the Johnson Space Center and seen this? I took this out to Johnson Space Center. This is what landed on the moon. There's a lunar lander with 4 legs, 1, 2, 3, and there's one right back behind you can't see. And here's the ladder. They climbed down to the moon. Astronauts were in this compartment here. Now, this was taken at the Rocket and Space Museum in Huntsville, Alabama. Have any of y'all been there? If you get a chance, go to the one in Alabama. They have a lot of rockets on display there. Here's some more of the rockets in Huntsville. This rocket right here is the rocket that put the first man into space for the United States. It's called the Redstone, Mercury Redstone. They took 2 rockets, the Mercury rocket, the Redstone rocket, and kind of joined them together. They call it the Mercury Redstone. Here it is in a test flight. This is way back in probably 1955, 56, something like that, at White Sands, New Mexico. You see, it looks kind of like a desert. Look how simple the launch pad is. It was just a piece of metal. They set it on there, took off. In order to get to Earth orbit, you have to have some equations and a computer on board that will tell the rocket how to turn as it goes through the atmosphere. It starts off vertical, and it's going to tilt over, and it's going to keep tilting until finally it gets up to Earth orbit like this, thrusting in this direction, and it's going to cut off. Well, where it should be at different times during the flight, both in the pitch direction and maybe in the sideways direction, you need guidance equations. Here is what they look like. These right here calculate the pitch angle and the yaw angle sideways. These are recalculated every 2 seconds based upon measurements that are made on board the vehicle. On board the vehicle, you can measure how hard the thrust is pushing. You can measure the acceleration of the vehicle in the X, Y, Z direction in 3 directions. From that, you can get the velocity and the position. You can feed all these into the guidance equations, and so the guidance equations then, they adjust the amount of tilt at various times during the flight such that it can get to orbit using the least amount of fuel. Because you only have so much fuel. If you go up inefficiently and run out of fuel, you're not going to make it to orbit. Here are the 3 astronauts that landed on the moon the first time. Here's Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins. Michael Collins was the command module, they call him the command module pilot. He's the one that stayed in lunar orbit. And Aldrin and Armstrong went down to the surface of the moon. If you're thinking about going into any type of thing with NASA or an astronaut, you're going to need all the education you can get. You can tell that just simply by looking at people that have done it. Robert Goddard, you ever hear of the Goddard Space Flight Center in Virginia? That was named after him. He was a pioneer in American rocket studies, had a PhD in physics. Werner von Braun, that came from Germany, who was responsible for building the Saturn V rocket that we just saw that got us to the moon, had a PhD in physics. Commander Neil Armstrong, who landed the module on the moon, had a master's degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Southern California. Mike Collins, who graduated from West Point. Our lunar module pilot, Buzz Aldrin, had a PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in aeronautics. So these men got to do what they wanted to do because they had the education when the opportunity came. That's the key. Get all the education you can as soon as you can. When you get an opportunity, then take advantage of it. This is the Saturn V rocket just after it started to lift off. You can tell, here comes the flames out the back. You can see all the smoke that's already been thrown up. Here's the launch tower that holds onto it until right before it takes off. It's fairly white flames that come out. The first stage has liquid hydrogen and oxygen. You take hydrogen and oxygen and put them together and set it on fire, it's going to be an explosion. A rocket engine is a controlled explosion. Just simply, you control the amount of explosions that happens at one time so it doesn't blow everything apart. That's what it is. The second stage, by the way, up in here, has a mixture of liquid hydrogen and kerosene. It's a kind of a high-grade kerosene. It's called hydrazine. It's very much like kerosene. Right here, you see this little white thing right here? As the vehicle goes up and it goes through the atmosphere, the pressure on the end of the vehicle increases more and more. You think of this is a rocket going up, and here's the atmosphere. And as it goes faster, it becomes harder to get through the air. It's because it's going faster. It's moving all the air molecules, separating the air molecules, and as it goes faster, it causes heat and pressure that pushes down on the nose of this. So you want to be going very straight when you go through maximum pressure. If you're going sideways a little bit, it can just break your vehicle in half. So when we talk about maximum dynamic pressure on a space vehicle, it happens somewhere around a minute after liftoff, and it's very critical that it be going straight. And here you can see the shock wave that's actually caused by going through Mach 1 and maximum dynamic pressure at liftoff. Once you get into orbit and you want to head towards the moon, you're going to need some more guidance equations to tell you where you should be pointed the vehicle. So we have several things to consider. When should we ignite the engine, get it out of orbit? How long we should burn? And what direction should we be pointed? This is the flow chart of those equations. Now we say, well, where do we want to land? You can see here's some mountains here, here's some mountains there. This looks like pretty flat, so this was chosen as a landing site for the first mission to go to the moon. July the 20th, 1969. The Apollo 11 landed right here near the equator. I brought a lunar globe. You can see as you leave, if you want to take a look. Here written on the side is the Apollo 11 landing site right here. This one matches that one, but that's a picture of this one, so can't go wrong there. On the globe, there are other missions to where they landed also. As soon as the vehicle had landed on the moon, Neil Armstrong radioed back to Earth and said the Eagle had landed. The lunar lander name was Eagle. They usually give names to a spacecraft, various ones that we call the Eagle. So he radioed back, the Eagle has landed. This is what we left on the moon. On the legs, on one of the legs of the lunar lander, there's a plaque that says, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969. We came in peace for all mankind." Here's the 3 astronauts. There's Richard Nixon, President of the United States. Here are the patches for all the Apollo missions. It started with 7. This was the Saturn V vehicle that put 3 astronauts up. They went into Earth orbit to test out what's called the service module. The second one, 8, was kind of interesting in that this is the one that went around the moon and came back. And while they were going around the moon, they took all the pictures. So for the first time, we had a complete picture of what the backside of the moon looked like. Because you know the same side of the moon faces